Okay, thank you. Welcome back to the last session. So in this lesson, we're looking at preparing for the future. And so I'd like to invite to the stage Grégory Lièvre, who is the Section Manager for the Certification Director's Office, Dominique Renaud, Section Manager for Business Jets, and Rachel Deschler, the Certification Director. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grégory Lièvre, and I'm the head of the Certification Director's Office. And I was given 20 minutes to share information with you on two topics, resources in the City Directorate and international relations. So the second topic is quite common. It's a kind of standalone agenda item. But the first one, you may wonder why. And maybe like Rodrigo's children, your children in the morning ask you, why is the sky blue? How many liters of water in the sea? Why did EASA make a presentation on resources? The last one is less likely, but you never know. So the main reason, in fact, is because that topic was raised on a number of occasions by industry. We sense this is an area which is attracting some attention. It was apparent in some of the questions today, so we'll try to address the points that were raised earlier. So maybe, if you allow me, I would go back a few years in the past during COVID period. Of course, now we all have the feeling it was in a previous life. Of course, it was fixed. We are happy to be all together without masks and so on. But of course, if you recall, at the beginning of 2020, there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions. We saw things which we did not think could happen, like hundreds of airplanes on the ground, closed airports, and so on. So EASA management did what most of the main leaders of the aviation industry did. They built scenario and they took some measures, and especially in the early days, some conservative measures to protect the financial sustainability of the agency. So there was a period post-COVID during which we froze the recruitment. So we had a few levers, and we did not replace them because of the uncertainty on our resources, on our revenues, and the overall context. So this lasted a few months, and gradually, as the scenarios were less and less pessimistic, we started to hire again, focusing on the most critical technical areas. However, we are an administration. We have a number of constraints. We have to ensure equal opportunities and fairness in our recruitment activities. So between the moment when top management presses a button and say we can start to hire again, and the moment when the newcomers are operational, there can be a few months and sometimes even years. So gradually we started to recruit again towards the end of 2020 and more actively in 2021 and even 2022. But because of this delay, there was a low point, an inflection point, in fact, at the end of June this year, where we were at the lowest since COVID. And we took some measures. I'll come back to that. But this is something which some of you felt, and that's the root cause for some of the issues that were reported by industry in the previous session. Another element to mention is that we don't have so many leverages in terms of our resources. We outsource to NAAs, but during that period, in fact, NAAs had the same difficulties, and we lost also some capacity from the National Aviation Authorities. Sorry, NAAs stands for National Aviation Authorities. So the main leverage we had could not be activated to a great extent. On the contrary, on that front as well, there was a drop in capacity. So that's for the capacity aspect. In terms of workload, what we noted was during COVID a very slight decrease, but not as significant as one might have thought. In fact, design activities were decorrelated from operations. So the inflow of activity that we received did not drop dramatically. It remained relatively stable, give and take. If you average, continuing airworthiness, and initial airworthiness, all product lines, there are some differences, of course. But altogether, our workload, especially on conventional products, has remained relatively stable. In addition, we have an increase in anything which relates to innovation. So a workload which tends to be stable to increasing, and a workforce which has dropped, led to the difficulties that some of you reported. So that's the situation. So, of course, we took some measures. We took some short-term measures and longer-term measures, and I'll say a few words about each of these. So, in terms of short-term measures, I mentioned outsourcing. So we had a very dynamic dialogue with our partners, with the NAAs, and some of them were able to recruit or to increase their capacity, and they increased a little bit the amount of hours they could provide to us. So that was one avenue we explored with them, and we managed to increase a little bit, and we continue to increase the amount of work which is outsourced to the NAAs and qualified entities. And we also had a dialogue with our stakeholders, with our applicants. So many of you were involved in discussions with us when we said, look, you have 5 STCs. Because of capacity constraints, some of them might be delayed. Which ones are more urgent for you? We heard a lot today from Bragi in particular, that timing and transparency are of the essence for industry. We are aware of that. And at least what we tried to provide during this period was transparency, as much predictability as possible, and a frank and open dialogue with those applicants whom we knew might be affected by some delays. So that was a short-term measure we took. In parallel, we worked on longer-term measure, and what I call middle to longer-term is recruitment. So as I indicated, we started to initiate again some external recruitments towards the end of 2020, but essentially in 2021 and this year. It was quite massive. We had an increase of more or less 5% of our workforce between June and December this year. One thing I would like to highlight as well is that our staff was under double pressure in a way, because during that period there was the workload of the projects which had to be dealt with, and at the same time it's the same experts who were involved in recruitment, because when you recruit a highly specialized expert, you need another equally specialized expert to select the right person. And then when the newcomers arrive, we also invest a lot into onboarding newcomers, into transferring knowledge. So that's why there was this period where a reduced workforce had to work and to invest, in addition to the daily work, into recruiting and onboarding newcomers. So that's why there was this alignment of stars, which created a number of challenges. The good news is that, as I said, we are onboarding a lot of newcomers nowadays. We are ramping up. We protected also our technical resources. So when we started to recruit again, all our recruitments were made on technical experts. So we did not replace one-to-one the non-technical staff, and we focused the resources we had on technical profiles. And with that, we are now getting close to pre-COVID staffing levels in terms of technical experts. And we plan to go beyond next year. You may have noticed that there were a few vacancy notices on our website for certification in the past few weeks. A few others are coming. I would like to take this opportunity to advertise them. EASA is a fantastic place to work. I hope some of you will apply. Be ready, there will be a number of vacancies coming in the next month and weeks. So what we anticipate is to have a stable situation in the course of next year. So we have a number of newcomers who are expected, and known newcomers who will start in Q1 next year. We know it takes a bit of time before they are fully operational. In the course of next year, until the end of next year, we'll have a number of newcomers. So roughly, with the anticipation we have on the evolution of the workload, we expect that in the course of 2023, the situation will improve, and towards the end of next year, we anticipate to see a real improvement in terms of balance between workforce and workload. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to share with you today. So as a conclusion, we would like our stakeholders and applicants to appreciate that we are aware of the difficulties. We heard that earlier today, but we heard that in other fora. Industry usually quite good at finding channels to express this kind of feedback. So we are aware and we are not ignoring the problem. We took short-term actions, we took middle-term action and longer-term actions. And bear with us, we expect that the situation will continue to improve in the course of next year. So with that, I think I can conclude the first part. I'm already a bit late. And then I will share a few updates with you on the international developments. So we've decided to focus on a few partners, China, the US. Then we have a few updates to share with you on bilateral relations with a few other partners. And then a few words, if we have time, on CMT and multilateral frameworks. So I'll start with this chart. So I would invite you not to focus too much on the exact figures, but the purpose of this was to show you where our effort is focused in terms of international relations. So to the left, you have the amount of hours we spent to validate foreign products in 2019, just to take a reference before COVID, and we could have taken another year. And to the right, you have the number of CSV projects. So these are the projects where we support validation by a foreign authority of our certificates. So of course, to the right, it's not a number of hours, it's just a number of projects. So it might be a bit misleading. But what we wanted to show you is just some order of magnitudes and to show that the US is really dominant in terms of the flow of activity that we have with international partners. So that leads me to the next slide. So the main message is that overall, the relation is extremely active. We have a close relationship at every level with the FAA. As you saw from the previous slide, there is a lot of volume of work in both directions. So the relation is healthy altogether. We sometimes disagree, but we have a number of tools to address disagreements. So I wanted to mention here some of the ongoing developments. So we have discussions on systemic issues. So that's an area where we know industry is sometimes vocal and for good reasons. So we hear that feedback in various fora. We have in particular this VPRG validation project review group, which is co-chaired by my colleague and friend Charles Leboeuf, who's in the room. So that's a new tool to collect systemic issues a posteriori. So when a project is difficult, we think it's not the right moment to analyze the root cause of difficulties. We prefer to let the heat of the validation project go down, and afterwards, our experts, our PCMs, and their counterparts in the FAA look back to what went wrong. Sometimes it was an issue with the work plan, sometimes it was a communication issue, sometimes the escalation process was not properly followed. So we try to draw lessons on the systems from this experience. We also work within the COB, the Certification Oversight Board, about some systemic issues, typically the SEIs, the safety emphasis items, which is a topic on which the directors spend a lot of energy to improve the very safety component of the SEIs. I thought you might be interested to know that we are working also with the FAA on the future validation improvement roadmap. So for those who are not familiar with that document, it was signed in 2016 and renewed in 2018. And it's a document which provides a more or less 5-year vision about the relationship between both authorities. And we are about to finalize a renewed version of this document for the next 5 years. I mentioned some task forces which were created by the COB, the Certification Oversight Board. So the Abstraction Layer Task Force, the Environmental Task Force, the MMEL, Master Minimum Equipment List, and the eVTOL Task Forces. So I don't have time to go into the details of these, but if you have questions, we'll address them afterwards. And last but not least, we are deeply involved in rulemaking cooperation. That's a message we got from our stakeholders, that their priority is to ensure that the regulatory frameworks between the US and the EU remain as harmonized as possible. So this is something which is attracting a lot of attention from Lirio Liu and Rachel in the COB. A few words about CAC. So the BASA was concluded, entered into force about 2 years ago, we had 4 COB meetings already with CAC. So in the early times of the post-entry into force, there were a lot of difficulties, training of staff, forms which were not in place, processes which were not agreed. So we spent a lot of time and energy with our CAC partners to work on these, to improve them. We had also to agree on certain interpretations of the tip. We managed to publish commonly agreed FAQs, and this took a lot of energy, but it was very helpful to align the understanding between CAC and us. I can mention lately we had discussions about the termination of EU certificates in China and production matters. These are not yet resolved, but they are still being discussed. So the main message about China is that we heard a lot of concerns from our industry in the past years about the way the BASA was implemented. What we noted is lately the situation seems to have improved, in particular for a number of validation projects which started before the BASA entry into force and which were still pending completion on the CAC side. Most of them were recently completed. So we have a feeling that the relationship is really improving and that the BASA is better and better implemented. We have a number of metrics, in particular for those time-limited activities which are prescribed in the tip. We measure them. We discuss that with CAC. So we expect and hope that the improvement we have noted will continue, and we are sparing no effort to achieve that with our CAC partners. So a few words about other BASA partners. So we have altogether 5 BASA. The EU is concluding 5 bilateral aviation safety agreements. So the US, in fact, 6 with the UK. So I mentioned the US and China. So with the UK, we had already 3 COB meetings. The relationship is quite good. We have a number of tip implementation aspects to discuss, but no major difficulty was reported to us. With Transport Canada, we have essentially 2 topics in the pipeline. One is to start implementing in a systematic manner so-called lightweight work plan for major changes level 1. So this is something which was created, this lightweight work plan between our chief PCM validation and his counterpart in TCCA. And this was a request from industry and from TCCA to better drive the timing of validation activities. So we just decided that a couple of weeks ago, and the implementation will start as of next year. We are also working with TCCA and also with ANAC on future alignment of certain principles among CMT partners. So CMT partners are Canada, Brazil, US, and the EU. And we try to align as much as possible, like basic, non-basic terminology versus level 1, level 2, in order to have consistency as much as possible between the various tips. So this is why with TCCA and with Brazil, we intend to sign a new tip next year. With Brazil, I also mentioned the work we are doing on LSA. So that's an area which creates difficulties with many partners when there is no certificate. Most BASA have in their scope the validation of a certificate. So when a product does not hold a certificate, it's legally difficult to validate it. So this triggered a number of discussions with our colleagues and friends from ANAC, and we are still working on solutions. And the last partner I wanted to mention here is GCAP, Japan. Very healthy relationship as well. We hear positive feedback from industry. We are working on a tip update. You may recall that the tip was concluded quite quickly after the entry into force of the BASA, and there were still empty sections, so we are filling them. Plus, we have a new section on the Japanese version of AFMS. So the main message on these partners is that from industry, the signals are rather positive. We didn't hear major issue being reported. There were a few developments which were raised by some of you in previous fora, so we thought we might provide a very brief update. Within Indonesia, we are in talks for an MOU with an airworthiness section on it. The negotiation started, so it's a bit too early to speak about the content, but it's one of the partners with which we want to strengthen the relationship. With Saudi Arabia, we are also planning a meeting in the coming weeks. There were some changes in their regulatory environment, which triggered some difficulties during validation activities that were reported to us. We are working now on a revised version of the working arrangement to facilitate the validation by GACA of our certificates. So the meeting is planned in January next year, so very soon. Of course, we are also very much involved in the situation in Ukraine. So as an EU entity, we are supporting the Commission in all the initiatives that were taken by the EU after the aggression. We are also working on possible hosting of SAU experts within EASA. We hope that this will happen next year. And we also started the validation of some certificates from Ukraine, in particular in the engine area. And the last development I wanted to report on these bilateral partners, but not BASA partners, is Israel. You may have been informed that there was a national bilateral with Israel, which was terminated a few months ago. So we had to put in place a new framework. We are negotiating actively a working arrangement with Israel. And our executive director signed an Article 9.2 so-called decision. That's a tool which allows the acceptance of foreign production. I'm running out of time, so these slides will be distributed. On the CMT, maybe I will just mention, maybe on the previous slide, this is of interest to you, the 3 task TSTs. So the CMTS is the secretariat of the CMT, and it's a body which was tasked by the CMT leaders to monitor the work of the CAGs, but also to create specific tasks when there is a need. And I wanted to mention that we have 3 ongoing, one on electric and hybrid propulsion systems, one on common mode dissimilarities, and one on flight crew alerting. So this is work in the make. The first one on flight crew alerting is about to conclude its work. And because I'm late, maybe I will let you read those topics for the next 10 seconds while we change speakers. And if you have any questions, we'll be very happy to answer them afterwards. Thanks for your attention.
Good afternoon, everyone. Destination future-proof is the topic that you have in the agenda today that I will present. Destination future-proof was the name given to agency-wide transformation program that was launched short before the pandemic arrived. It aiming to prepare the agency for the next challenge of in the future. So mainly the activity was to review the processes that the agency has and to make sure that we are resilient for what's ahead of us. I am Dominique Renaud. I'm the head of the business jet section in EASA. Section leading multiple type certification activities. And I was assigned first quarter 2021 because of my exposure to type certification to review the type certification process within the frame of the Destination Future-Proof project. It was a challenge. The task was start with a clean sheet, go in-depth review with the critical eyes on how we are performing type certifications. We need to get ready for the future. The world out there is developing very fast, new technologies, evolving business demand. There is changing regulatory context. There might be increasing number of newcomers in the aviation sector, and a new business model as well. How, within the initial airworthiness process of type certification, can we get ready for that? So, provide concrete actions, deliverables, and implement within less than 1 year. That was the challenge that was given. Now, the challenge now is to give you visibility of what we have been doing since 1 year in less than 10 minutes. So the first things we get interesting, what is the core action, or where are you as a stakeholder expecting EASA to act within the initial airworthiness? You are expecting us to provide you the regulatory basis to design your aircraft. From that, this is the core. Accompany you in the innovation to have proper regulatory basis. And this is what we focused on. We need to do that, we need to preserve the knowledge as well. We review who are performing the work. Is there any ways to improve the way we are using the resources so that they focus on what really matters? How can we provide best response to the industry needs and to accompany innovation? So all that together led us to identify several areas of actions that we call work stream, where we put together all the management of certification directorate to sponsor this. Together with this, it's not alone. I'm just here the orchestra, chef d'orchestre. And we have identified that to better provide the certification basis, we need to work with you in anticipating what are the innovations. So we need to provide a floor for innovation, and this is how we work on the pre-application services. This morning it has been described by Alain regarding what are the pre-application services, and we have added another contract, which is called the PAC, to offer a place to welcome innovation. Then, to make the best use of our resources, we want to make sure that they are working on a project that is mature, with as well a mature organization. And here, what we want is to help you assess the level of maturity of the design and the projects to make sure that you apply at the right time. And then it will make the type certification quicker and more efficient. So those two aspects are really the two processes that we've been working hard the past month. And we have as well internally reviewed how we distribute the task within EASA, within the expert, within the PCM and the staff, from the moment that we receive an application to the moment you will be delivered with a type certificate. So are all the tasks that are involved in these processes assigned to the right qualified people? So this is the work that we have been doing internally and on which we are progressing to identified area of improvement. In addition to that, we need to preserve the knowledge because we need to be robust to the turnover of people. We cannot rely only on individuals. We need to have a system in place that would preserve the knowledge and ensure continuation so that we ensure continuity in the quality of our service. The review of the roles and responsibility is also an area that we have looked at to make sure that if there is any improvement needed in that area. Here, agile workforce management is about working together on a type certification with the stakeholders, with the type certificate holder, to ensure that we achieve your milestone together, that we understand what are, where are your milestones, and that we accompany you to achieve your milestone. And this is about how we're able to mobilize our resources in line with your planning so that together we make sure that the deliverable expected at the time targeted is reached. And also regarding our tools for certification, this is something that we are going to review as well, to provide more clarity on how and when we are using CRI or certification memo. We have heard that this might not necessarily be always clear, and we are reviewing that aspect as well. So as I said, we have started 1 year ago. It's a lot of work behind all those activities. I cannot summarize them in 10 minutes, but today, this week, at least what we have achieved, is that we can offer, as part of the pre-application service, a new floor to work before application on your innovations, to make sure that we have the proper regulatory basis for you to design before applying for the type certificate. So this new pre-application service has been now integrated in our quality systems and is also now available on our EASA website. I mentioned before about the maturity, how to assess when you bring innovations that your organizations or your product are mature enough so that you are ready for type certificate, because this is really important for you to not waste time or cost by applying prematurely. So this new policy, there is a proposed certification memo that is now also published on our website. It was mentioned this morning. It's open for comment until the 12th of December. So I would invite you to look at this one. So those are the deliverables that we managed to perform within 1 year and that I can give you visibility about. The rest are still under implementations, and we are continuing. So the benefit that we are expecting from that is really to enable innovations and working in cooperation with the stakeholders. As I said, anticipate certification basis for novel design, have shorter lead time to define the certification basis after we receive the applications, and make sure that we protect our resources and that they work on mature and viable projects. So that's the end. Thank you for your attention. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Dominique. And we are in a session that is called Preparing for the Future. And we think that preparing for the future is also implying working on mitigating systemic risks that we have seen materializing in some tragic events in the past. So we have also a safety-related activity going on as an improvement project that we have named 737 MAX Lessons Learned. And I want to give you a very brief overview of the topics we are addressing under this activity. So first of all, you are probably aware that as part of, there has been a 737 MAX intensive technical reinvestigation from the certification authorities before return to service of the aircraft. And EASA has been fully part of this work in very close cooperation with our colleague authorities from the FAA, Transport Canada, and ANAC Brazil. It has been really a true, very close cooperation exercise, difficult. It has lasted a long time, technically challenging. From our side, a huge technical effort in terms of expert involvement across multiple panels and looking beyond direct technical causes of the accidents. So that has been clearly one important part of the work. And we continue to have very close monitoring of what is happening on this aircraft type in service in particular. So next to that, and I think we are not the only organization having done that. I'm aware that some of our major industry stakeholders have done similar reviews from themselves. The question that we have all tried to answer is this something that could have happened also in the frame of the European system, on the European product, or as an outcome of the European certification system? And also, what is it that we can learn from all the investigations and all the findings that have been made in the wake of the two accidents? And there have been quite a number of technical investigations. There have been the two traditional, the standard accident investigations from Indonesia and from Ethiopia, obviously, which have been two major inputs to our reflection. But on these events, there has been much more. There has been NTSB work. There has been independent authority group investigation under the so-called JTR report. So I think in the aviation history, these two accidents have been part of the most investigated events. We have also looked internally at ourselves, back into the history of our own certification and validation exercise and what we could have learned from that. As a result, we have decided to focus on a number of key action areas. It's not possible to go in depth into all possible action areas that may be relevant in this context, but we really have tried to decide for ourselves where we could gain the highest safety added value. Yes, these are the four work streams on which we are working on currently. They are essentially related to policy, certification policy, and also certification process, how we do work together with you. And it has a lot to do with human factors aspects in certification, but not only. So the first topic is human factors in 1309 certification, which is the question of how we account for human performance when we do system safety analysis during initial certification work, whether it is for an UTC or a derivative airplane. And it's all around questions like how do we what assumptions do we take? What assumptions does the manufacturer take on human performance? Things like crew reaction time or crew detection of failures, and that we take credit for when we do system safety assessment. The second topic is better integration of human factors in the continuing airworthiness process. As much as the first topic is relatively easy and conventional to deal with because we are talking about certification requirements, certification policy and process, the second one is more challenging to address properly because we are trying here to answer the question of what can we learn from in-service experience, from what is happening in operation, about the validity of the assumptions we have made during initial certification. So it's really about bridging the knowledge we can get from operations and the initial assumptions we have done in certification. And you can see already that here we have more actors involved. We need to find a way to get good quality data from where it's generated, from within the airlines, from within some training organizations, and feed that back into our continuing airworthiness process which takes place typically at the TC holder and together with us. The third work area is development assurance. So here we are back into traditional certification. How do we do certification of complex systems? When do we think that we need to ask you to deploy structured development assurance methodologies depending on the type of product, the type of change, the complexity, and the risk levels of the systems? The fourth work area is the change product rule, which has been under a lot of scrutiny also, because as you know, the 737 MAX is a derivative of derivative of derivative, etc. And the certification basis of this aircraft is the result of multiple change product rule iterations. So on all these topics, we have different levels of cooperation and harmonization between authorities and also cooperation with industry. The ultimate goal is clearly to achieve outputs which are harmonized, at least within the group of CMT authorities, which are depicted here. For change product rule, we have Part 21 requirement and guidance material, which are today fully harmonized across the CMT authorities. The work that is being done here is international. So we have an international working group, which is led by the FAA. The FAA has a clear Congress mandate to rework the change product rule in cooperation with international authorities. So we are working within the CMT plus CAA, China, and the Japanese certification authority. On development assurance, for the moment, this is work that is being done by EASA. We are also exchanging and communicating with our industry on that, especially our main TC holders. Ultimately, we will also aim at harmonization with our partners. The same applies to the integration of human factors in the continued airworthiness process. But here, the first step is really to provide a bit more guidance to our operators and to our manufacturers about how they can better integrate human factor inputs coming from in-service data. Human factors in 1309, that's a topic where we have a few months ago issued a draft certification memo, which is in anticipation of future rulemaking at the level of AMC to 1309, and we are working towards the final version of that. We got several hundreds of comments. We are also working with our CMT partners on this very topic in the CMT with the goal to achieve harmonized approaches to HF in 1309. So that was a very brief overview of the work area so that you are aware of what is happening there. You will see from time to time certain outputs in the form of draft certification memo, or in the case of change product rule, it will very likely lead to at least some updates to Part 21 guidance material at the minimum. And yeah, that was all I wanted to share on this topic. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you to all the speakers. I hope you found it interesting. Let's go to the questions. So the first one, is the pre-application service only accepted for new TC applications or also for major change applications that could be considered novel? So, Al, or do you want to answer that? Or should we,
yes, the pre-application contract is the new services that we are offering through the Initial Airworthiness Improvement Initiative. There are other services within these pre-application services, the IPCs and the TAC. If we are talking only about the new pre-application contract, it is aiming to anticipate certification basis establishment for innovative projects. This is really the main items, so that once you go to the applications, you don't lose too much time in trying to identify if the certification basis is adequate. And this is for innovation. If Alain, if you want to add.
Yeah, just to complement and support what you said, Dominique, in fact, the pre-application services is an agency workflow. And as part of this agency workflow, certification is one of the key pillars. So, of course, most of the pre-application services will be Part 21 minded, because, as you said, it is to be more efficient in the future certification program. However, it is valid for any activity in the agency. We plan to have, for instance, pre-application services for ATM services, for drone operation, for new concept, for new systems and system of systems. So you see, it is very open, and the fundament, the basis of this is, as described by Dominique, is initial worthiness for the purpose of facilitating market intake of new product and disruptive technology. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Alain. Thanks, Dominique. The next question, development assurance has moved from panel 12 to panel 10. Does this mean that DA is focusing now on software and AH only? No, the way they work is not really changed. It's just that we felt it was, in terms of the way that they work already, and in common with the teams, that we felt that this was the best place to focus at. But it is not focusing, it's not changing the focus or their activity. So the next question, regarding the BASA tip with the UK CAA, has there been any discussion around an update to allow EASA acceptance of UK TSO approvals without validation? Gregory?
I can answer that one.
Yeah.
This was not a topic raised in the COP so far.
Okay.
So the answer is no.
Okay, thank you. Regarding initial airworthiness improvement, is EASA's intent to apply this to STCs also?
The initial airworthiness improvement should benefit all projects. So we are looking at it in a really global aspect. So yes.
Okay, thank you. So on to the next question. As part of improvement stream for initial airworthiness, did you consider further improvement on LOI application? So is LOI covered under the initial airworthiness improvement? Do you want to say something on that, Dominique? Or?
I can take it. Yeah. So on LOI, so far there is no work topic on LOI in the transformation project. But as we have discussed previously, there is a need now that we have implemented LOI since some time. To review how this is working and how we are implementing it, whether it's bringing the expected benefits, whether it's implemented systematically. So at this stage, I would say there is a need for checking how it's going.
Okay, thank you. So on to the next question. Are there any plans or ongoing activities for harmonizing the EHPS regulatory framework between EASA and the FAA? So Gregory,
maybe I can take that one. So as I mentioned very briefly, this is one of the tasks which is under the CMTS. So harmonization with the FAA is sometimes done bilaterally under the COB, but there are certain areas which are of common interest to all the CMT partners. So in those cases, even though sometimes the work is driven essentially by the FAA and EASA, it is felt more efficient to start upfront with the 4 partners. And that was the decision made for EHPS. So we have a tasking which was created for EHPS under the CMTS. Sorry for all these acronyms. So it is done with the FAA, but as part of the multilateral framework, also with TCCA and ANAC, Brazil.
Thanks, Gregory. When is the next EASA FAA COB, VIR, issue 4 expected? And will the ongoing VPRG activities impact the COB focus areas as established in the VIR issue 3?
So it's difficult to give a timing because we are still talking with the FAA. The plan is to have this document signed at the beginning of next year. The name will change, by the way. It will be called the Bilateral Enhancement Roadmap. That was a proposal from the FAA, so the name will change, but it will be the continuation of the VIR. And there was a second part of the question. So I know Charles, maybe, because we have the co-chair of the VPRG with us, so maybe Charles, you want to say a few words on the VPRG activities. Maybe while the mic is being given to Charles, the way it's working, a lot of activities identified in the VPRG are then referred to the COB, and then the COB decides whether they are addressed directly in the VPRG or taken by the COB itself. So there is a kind of triage once the issues have been identified by the VPRG. But maybe, Charles, you want to expand on this?
Yep. Good afternoon. Charles Leboeuf. Yes, as you indicated, Gregory, the COB takes as an input the various discussions at the level of the VPRGs, and it's up at the level of the COB to orientate the evolution of the bilateral relations. We did not go into details of the activities of that group, the VPRG, but it goes into practical implementation, some recommendations. So there is a bit of discrepancy between the technical aspects of our discussion and let's say the more strategical orientations of the VIR. But definitely some inputs may be taken into account to orientate the VIR evolution. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Gregory. And the next one for development assurance stream, how alignment will be ensured with FAA if not identified in Congress mandate?
So I would say as we are working on any policy topic with the FAA through our regulatory cooperation, and there has been a lot of emphasis put recently, especially by us towards the FAA and reciprocally, to try to meet a bit better industry expectation about our level of harmonization with FAA policies. So, yeah, like any other policy or regulatory topic, we would bring things up at the agenda of our regulatory cooperation meetings with the FAA.
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. So the next question, how the CMT is planning to give visibility to industry about the activities covered by task-specific groups?
So thank you. That's a question which we heard several times in the CMT. So we had the CMT week recently, and that was a request from industry. So first, once a year, there is a so-called CMT week, and at the end of that CMT week, there is a CMT Industry Day. So that's an opportunity where the authorities debrief industry and exchange with industry. So industry indicated that they would like to have a more active involvement into the CMTS tasking, but there was no decision made on the spot, and this is something which the CMT leaders and the CMTS will discuss in the coming month. We have an action from industry to come back to you on this topic, but there was no decision reached so far. You know, Rachel.
But I would like to add that at least we are making public all deliverables, so all harmonized papers which are outputs of the CMT group activities are available publicly. We are putting them on our website, and so does the FAA, I think. And yes, the intent is to give visibility much more upstream at the level of the terms of reference in particular.
Okay, thank you both. Is EASA discussing the acceptance of design verification reports for UAS with partners? If yes, can you provide progress? I see we have Antonio down there, if Antonio can take that one.
Yes, we are discussing with the FAA, TCCA, and ANAC, but not just regarding the DVR process. It's a discussion that will touch on the whole product transferability issue among these partners and across all the classes of risk. So from starting from, I'm talking of the specific category operation, starting from the lower SACE, 1 and 2, up to the highest. So it's a discussion very much focused on the harmonization and the reciprocal acceptance of means of compliance for all the risk classes.
Okay. Thank you, Antonio. So next question, if I have a specific question to the FAA tip, whom can I ask for?
I think the main entry point would be your PCM, but if the question is too specific, we have an internal pyramid, and at the top it's our chief PCM validation, Charles, but usually your PCM or the senior PCM validation should be able to answer the questions. So that's the main entry point for such questions.
Okay, thank you. And we seem to have run out of questions for the first time all day. So, yeah, if there are no more questions.
If we are running out of questions on the Slido, it's probably a sign that we are getting close to the end of this meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
thank you, guys. Finish the session.
Thank you, Colin. And yes, I'm pleased to invite our Executive Director, Patrick Key, for a few closing remarks.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure for me to be here and to see so many people in the room, and I don't know about the people who are following online, but it shows the level of interest and enthusiasm that you have for the different topics that were addressed today. I understand that there were a lot of very lively discussions. And I certainly welcome this. It's important that EASA listens to you, hears your feedback on our activities, on the way we see our future and the way in which we need to communicate with you and with stakeholders in general. So I very welcome this workshop. I very welcome and thank you for your presence. And I thank also all the speakers who participated to this event. We should never forget that what we are working for is safety, and that we are all trying to increase the level of safety of our industry. Obviously, the number of accidents, incidents in which the design was the major contributor to the incidents has historically continuously decreased and is continuing to decrease. And that should be understood and interpreted as an indicator that our system is indeed very robust. But you know better than I do that in our field of work, there is no room for complacency. And recent accidents have shown that we need to stay very vigilant, especially on the interface between design and human performance, where we saw in the past that indeed, if the design in itself was not necessarily the only contributor to an accident, the interface between the design and the human performance was one of the key contributing factors to an accident or an incident. And therefore, we need to continue working together on new types of initiatives like the SMS implementation, which is a big deal for all of us. And I understand that you had a lot of discussions on this today, but also learning from possibly accidents, in particular on what happened with the Boeing 737 MAX. I would like to say, and I saw the questions which were asked to my colleagues here. There were a lot of questions on the bilateral relationship with other authorities. And I can say, I don't know if Rachel or colleagues mentioned that before, but I think we are having a much better relationship with the FAA, in particular now with the changes in the management in the FAA, with the willingness from the FAA side to cooperate not only with us but also with all the other authorities, and to learn lessons, in particular on the 737 MAX, but also in order to work better together. So we see that in our everyday life, in the projects, but we see that also for the work for the future, where we have received more and more inputs or questions or comments or reaching out from the FAA to work together with us on new technologies, in particular, like for drones or eVTOL. So I think it's very encouraging, and I dare to say that we are partnering in a stronger manner now with the FAA than we did before. You discussed innovation, and that's one of our major priorities in EASA, because in fact the start of our activities on drones and UAS was an eye-opener for us in terms of what new types of stakeholders could bring in terms of approach to airworthiness, to safety, but also we saw with drones in particular that there was a range of new technologies which were being used in other industries, which could be used also in our domain in order to bring more safety. And I think Alain Leroy gave you an update on what we do on innovation. And so innovation for us is important because it allows us to open our eyes to new possibilities provided by new technologies like AI or new communication technologies. It also provides us with new ways of thinking safety or new ways of thinking operations. And that's very enriching for us. And we are willing to continue to learn, but also we are willing to continue to help you help us, in fact. So it's important that innovation is brought in our business in a safe manner, and who better than the certification authority can advise the industry on what could be certifiable, what could not be certifiable, what is worthwhile in terms of investment, in terms of safety, or what is not worthwhile in our view. And I think the strength of our approach to innovation is indeed that we do not look only at the pure technical aspects of innovation, but also at the regulatory aspects, are the softer aspects such as human factor implications and so on and so forth. So this is really something that we invest a lot on and on which we have partnership with a certain number of you, and we intend to continue to develop this type of partnership because it's bringing, I think, a lot to all of us. In particular, when you look at our common societal challenges on sustainability of aviation, we know that we will not be able to reach the targets which have been set for our community or for our business if we don't bring innovation into the technologies which are used today in aviation. We also see, of course, innovation as a way to bring safety improvement through digitalization, artificial intelligence, also using technology to mitigate the operational risk. And our motto in EASA is that we will allow for innovation as long as it brings at least a common or the same level of safety as today. So we will not bring innovation which decreases the level of safety. I also understand that you discussed about us as a supplier of services to you and how much quality we bring in the service and efficiency that we bring in serving you. You saw, and I think it was presented to you by Dominique Renaud, we are willing and committed to transform our processes, our activities, in order to be more efficient, to modernize our certification process, in order to be more fit for your issues and your challenges. I understand that you got a very inspiring presentation from Pipistrel with some new ideas that we will certainly take on board in order to see how we can better transform ourselves to better serve you in the future. Your continuous feedback for that is essential, and I really welcome the questions and answers, the discussions that took place during the day, because it's a way for us to understand what goes right, what goes wrong possibly, and how we can improve our service to you. And as you know, we recently closed a certification stakeholder survey to which a number of you have responded, and I thank you very much for that. When we look at the future and what are the real challenges, in fact, I already mentioned those, but we will need, and I guess that most of you are working on that, we need to be able to maintain the highest level of safety in our industry, but also to support the sustainability of the vehicles and of the aviation system, which is not necessarily something which is easy to apprehend and which will require a lot of work. And there, in fact, we have created inside EASA a cross-directorate program, which is the sustainability program, where we look at all the different domains in which we can work to improve the sustainability of our industry. And that starts with new technologies and, of course, the certification of aircraft, but it's also going into policy setting, into helping the European Union to implement SAF in Europe. It's also going through performance monitoring in terms of environmental performance of the system. It's looking at the air traffic management system, the airport systems, and so on and so forth. So we have a program which looks at all the different domains of aviation and sets targets, objectives, priorities, actions for the different entities within the agency to work together in order to contribute to the sustainability of our business. The other major initiative and strategic initiative for us is dealing with innovative air mobility, urban air mobility, drones. You know that the European Commission launched their strategy for drones, the so-called Drone Strategy 2.0, which is setting a target for the development of not only the regulatory material for innovative air mobility, but also how to build a strong and leading ecosystem around innovative air mobility. We are one of the major actors in there. We do not bring money to fund activities. It's the research funds in the EU which contribute to that. But we are, I think, the most advanced in the world in terms of regulatory landscape for enabling innovative air mobility, and we intend to continue to lead the efforts in this domain, which I think is a key for the European society. Finally, let me just tell you that it's almost Christmas. I guess that some of you will go to the Christmas market in Cologne. We are very, very happy to be able to have this face-to-face meeting with all of you today. We are very happy to finally being able to put behind us the COVID crisis. Let's hope that it won't come back, but we learned a lot from the COVID. I think we did a lot as well to allow for aviation to continue to grow. I would like to thank you all for all your efforts during the COVID times. It was difficult for you as it was difficult for us. I would like to thank you all for the constructive relationship that you have continued to have with our team from EASA and for the very constructive workshop that we had today. I wish you all a safe trip back to your countries. Enjoy the city of Cologne if you can today and tomorrow, and have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Okay, thank you, Patrick. It just leaves me to say and to remind you, please fill in the surveys that are coming out after this event. We'll also have the videos from today uploaded on the EASA YouTube channel. That's it for today. Thank you very much for your participation also for me, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.